I came home early that day. No warning, no calls, just an instinct to turn the car around and head back. Maybe it was exhaustion. Maybe it was the gnawing feeling in my gut that something wasn't right. I had been sitting in my office, staring at the clock, and for some reason, every second that passed felt like a waste of time. I told my boss I wasn't feeling well, grabbed my keys, and left without another word. It was supposed to be a normal Tuesday. Nothing special. But the moment I pulled into the driveway, something in the air felt wrong. The curtains in the upstairs bedroom were half drawn, something my wife never did. She liked the sunlight, said it made the house feel alive. The front porch light was off, even though she usually left it on if she was expecting me home after dark. I killed the engine and sat there for a second, listening. The neighborhood was quiet, as it always was in the middle of the afternoon. A dog barked a few houses down. A lawnmower buzzed somewhere in the distance. But inside my house, silence. Too much of it. That silence pulled at something deep in my stomach. I grabbed my briefcase, stepped out of the car, and shut the door softly, like I was afraid of disturbing something I wasn't supposed to. My shoes crunched against the gravel as I walked to the front door, my fingers tightening around the handle before I even realized what I was doing. And then I saw them. A pair of heavy work boots. Muddy, worn down, the kind you'd expect from a man who worked with his hands all day. They were neatly placed next to my wife's sneakers, like they belonged there. But they didn't. For a second, my mind tried to make sense of it. A contractor? No, we hadn't scheduled anything. A friend? No, she didn't have any male friends who would just stop by unannounced. I stepped inside. The house smelled faintly of lavender, the same scent my wife used in the laundry, but underneath that, something else. Something musky. Something that didn't belong to me. My pulse hammered against my ribs. My jaw clenched. Then I heard it. A creak from upstairs. A soft thud. A shuffle of movement. I didn't need to see it to know what was happening, but my feet carried me forward anyway. Each step up the stairs felt heavier than the last. My hand gripped the railing so tight my knuckles turned white. When I reached the top, I hesitated. The bedroom door wasn't fully closed. It was cracked open just enough for me to see inside. And what I saw burned itself into my brain like a brand against flesh. My wife, naked, tangled in the sheets with another man. His arm was draped lazily over her stomach, his back toward me, muscles glistening with sweat. Her dark hair was fanned out across the pillow, her eyes closed, lips parted slightly, like she was lost in some dream world where I didn't exist. For a second, I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. Everything I thought I knew, everything I'd built my life around, crumbled in an instant. Then the rage came. It hit me so fast and so hard that I barely registered what I was doing before it was too late. My hand shot out, grabbing the first thing I could reach, a framed wedding photo hanging by the door. Our wedding photo, the one where we were smiling like two idiots, thinking we had the rest of our lives ahead of us. I ripped it from the wall, turned, and hurled it straight at the bed. The glass shattered. The frame broke apart. My wife's eyes snapped open. For a moment, she just stared at me, frozen like a deer caught in headlights. The plumber, this thick, sweaty excuse of a man, grunted, sat up, and blinked like he had just been yanked out of a dream. I could hear my own heartbeat pounding in my ears. My wife scrambled for the sheets, pulling them over herself like it made any difference. "Wait," she started, her voice shaky, but I didn't let her finish. I wasn't in the mood for excuses. I didn't need to hear some pathetic attempt at damage control. I turned and walked out, fists clenched so tight my nails dug into my palms. My vision blurred at the edges, my entire body pulsing with something raw and violent. I had no idea where I was going, no idea what I was going to do next. But one thing was certain, whatever life I thought I had was over. I don't remember how I got outside. One moment I was standing in that goddamn bedroom, staring at my wife and the plumber tangled in my sheets, and the next, I was storming through the front door, my fists clenched so tight my fingers felt like they might snap. My pulse roared in my ears, drowning out everything. The wind, the distant hum of traffic, the faint chatter of a neighbor's TV through an open window. I needed air. I needed space. I needed to get out of that house before I did something I couldn't take back. My feet hit the pavement fast, uneven. I barely saw where I was going, barely noticed the world around me. The only thing running through my mind was the image of her, my wife, the woman I trusted, the woman I built a life with, twisting in my bed with some stranger like I was nothing. Like I never existed. I felt sick. I should have expected some kind of betrayal. Maybe not like this, not this blatant, but deep down, something in me had known for a long time that something was off. I just never wanted to see it, never wanted to admit it. And now I couldn't unsee it. I don't know how long I walked. Could have been 10 minutes, could have been an hour. My mind was a tangled mess, my fist still shaking, my throat dry as hell. But eventually I stopped, just stood there, staring at the cracked pavement beneath my feet, trying to breathe through the fire in my chest. And then, like a sick joke, I heard it, the sound of my name being called. I turned, slow, already knowing who I'd see. There she was, my wife, standing on the sidewalk in nothing but a thin robe, hair a mess, face flushed. She looked frantic, desperate, like she actually gave a damn about what just happened. Like she thought she could fix this. Wait, just stop a second, she said, hurrying toward me, her voice shaking. I didn't move, didn't say a word, just watched as she came closer, bare feet slapping against the pavement. She hesitated, her eyes darting to my face, searching for something. Understanding, maybe. A chance. But all she found was the cold, hard wall of a man who had just lost everything. I can explain, she stammered. Explain? Explain what? Explain why she let another man touch her? Explain why she let him into my house, into my bed? Explain why she thought I wouldn't find out? The laugh that escaped my throat was bitter and sharp. I turned away, shaking my head. Please, she tried again, stepping closer, reaching for me. I didn't mean for this to happen. My body went rigid. I forced myself to breathe, to keep my hands at my sides instead of doing something reckless. You didn't mean for it to happen? I repeated, my voice low, dangerous. She flinched. No, I swear it wasn't. Her voice caught, like she couldn't find the right words. Because there were no right words. No excuses that would change what I saw. But she wasn't done. She took another step forward, her hands gripping the edges of the robe like it would somehow shield her from the mess she made. It was a mistake, she said, voice breaking. I wasn't thinking. I was lonely, and you've been so distant lately, and it just happened. I felt something crack deep inside me. Distant? I turned slowly, meeting her gaze, and for the first time since walking into that bedroom, I smiled. But there was nothing kind in it, nothing warm. I had worked my ass off for years to give her the life she wanted. Long hours, late nights, sacrifices she never even noticed. And now, she wanted to throw it all back at me, blame me for what she did. She must have seen something shift in my face because she took a small step back, her hands tightening around the robe. I didn't mean for it to happen, she said again, softer this time. It was just a moment of weakness. A moment of weakness, right? I exhaled slowly, my fingers flexing at my sides. I could have screamed at her, could have called her every name in the book, thrown her excuses back in her face. But what was the point? She knew what she did. I knew what she did. There was no going back from this. I stepped forward, watching as her breath hitched, her body tensing like she wasn't sure what I was about to do. Then, just as I passed her, I spoke. Go back inside, I said, my voice steady, empty. She blinked. What? Go back inside. I repeated, my tone like ice. Go back to him. Her face crumpled, and for a second, she looked like she might cry. But I didn't care. Not anymore. Without another word, I turned and walked away, leaving her standing there, shivering in the street. I didn't know where I was going, but I knew I wasn't going home. I didn't look back. Not when I heard her take a step toward me. Not when I heard her breath hitch like she wanted to call my name again. Not when the wind carried the sound of a door creaking open, telling me she had finally gone back inside, to him. I kept walking. My feet hit the pavement in slow, deliberate steps. My mind felt like it was on fire, burning with a rage I didn't know how to contain. It pulsed through my veins, made my fingers twitch like they were itching to grab something, to break something. But I didn't stop, didn't give in to it. I just walked. The streets were empty, quiet. The sun had started dipping lower in the sky, turning everything gold and orange. I barely noticed. My head was too full of noise, memories of my wife's voice, her touch, the way she used to look at me when she actually loved me. If she ever did. That thought made my jaw clench. Had she always been like this? Had she always been the kind of woman who could lie so easily, betray so effortlessly? Or had she changed over time, bit by bit, until she was someone I didn't recognize? Until I was just a stranger she shared a house with? Nothing more? I didn't know, and I wasn't sure I wanted to. I reached the end of the street and turned left, following a sidewalk that led toward downtown. I didn't have a destination, no plan, nothing but the need to move. To put as much space between me and that house as possible. But space didn't stop the memories. Didn't stop the image of my wife in our bed, her body tangled up with another man. The way she gasped when she saw me standing there. The way she scrambled for the sheets like it mattered. Like it wasn't already too late. A car passed by, its headlights flickering across my face. I barely noticed. I wasn't even sure how long I had been walking until I found myself in front of a gas station, the bright neon lights buzzing in the early evening air. My throat was dry, my body aching with tension I hadn't let out yet. I pushed open the door, stepping inside. The clerk barely glanced at me, too busy flipping through a magazine behind the counter. The place smelled like stale coffee and motor oil, the floor covered in faint smudges of dirt from boots that had walked in before mine. I wandered down an aisle, stopping in front of the refrigerators. My reflection stared back at me in the glass, and for the first time, I actually saw myself. I looked like hell. My shirt was wrinkled, my tie loosened, my hair a mess from running my fingers through it too many times. My eyes, God, my eyes looked hollow, like someone had scooped out everything inside me and left nothing but an empty shell. I yanked open the door, grabbed a bottle of water, and headed to the counter. The clerk rang me up without a word. I swiped my card, grabbed my drink, and walked back out into the cool evening air. I twisted the cap off, took a long sip, and leaned against the wall of the gas station, staring at nothing. My mind was spinning. I could go back. I could walk through that front door, drag that bastard out of my bed, and throw him onto the street. I could scream at my wife, demand answers, demand justice. But what would that do? Would it fix anything? Would it erase what I saw? No, it wouldn't change a goddamn thing. I pulled my phone from my pocket, staring at the screen. No missed calls. No messages. Nothing. Of course. She had begged me to stop, to listen, but now that I was gone, she had nothing to say. I exhaled slowly, gripping the phone so tightly my knuckles turned white. I could call someone. A friend, a coworker. But who? Who the hell was I supposed to turn to with this? Hey man, my wife just got caught screwing a plumber in our bed. You got any advice? No. No one needed to hear this. No one needed to know how pathetic I was. I shoved the phone back into my pocket and looked up at the sky. The sun had nearly set now, the last streaks of orange fading into deep blue. I didn't want to go back to that house. Didn't want to sleep under the same roof as her, breathe the same air. But I had nowhere else to go. And that was the worst part. I had built my entire life around her. Around us. And now there was no us. Just me. And I had no idea what the hell I was supposed to do next. I stood there against the wall of that gas station for what felt like forever. The cool bottle of water in my hand was sweating, condensation dripping down my fingers, but I barely noticed. The world around me was moving, cars pulling in and out, people coming and going, but it all felt distant, like I was watching it through a thick layer of glass. I should have felt something more. Shock, devastation, heartbreak, something. But all I felt was rage, hot and steady, sitting low in my chest like an ember that refused to burn out. I kept replaying it over and over in my head. The moment I pushed open that door, the way the sheets shifted, the way my wife's eyes went wide, the way that bastard scrambled to cover himself like a coward, like I was the intruder. I clenched my jaw, flexing my fingers. I had been walking for almost an hour, and it hadn't helped. It hadn't dulled the fire inside me. It hadn't erased the image of them together, hadn't quieted the sound of my wife's pathetic excuses. It just happened. What kind of excuse was that? Like she tripped and landed on top of him? Like she wasn't fully aware of what she was doing every single time she let him inside my house? She had chosen this. She had chosen to betray me, to lie to my face, to sleep in my bed with another man. And now, she expected me to just, what? Walk away? Move on? Pretend none of it happened? No, that wasn't going to happen. I pushed myself off the wall and took another swig of water before tossing the half-empty bottle into a nearby trash can. I didn't know where I was going, but I knew I couldn't stand still. Not when my mind was racing. Not when my entire body was thrumming with the kind of fury that didn't just fade away. I started walking again, this time with purpose. I don't know how I ended up at a bar. Maybe it was instinct. Maybe it was the only logical place to go when your entire world had just gone up in flames. It was a small dive, tucked between a laundromat and a pawn shop. The kind of place where the lights were dim, the air smelled like stale beer and cigarettes, and no one asked questions. Perfect. I stepped inside, the door creaking as it swung shut behind me. The place wasn't crowded, just a few guys nursing drinks at the bar, a couple in a corner booth speaking in hushed voices. No one looked up when I walked in. No one cared. Even better, I took a seat at the bar, nodding at the bartender. "What'll it be?" he asked, wiping down glass. "Whiskey." "Neat." He poured without a word, sliding the glass toward me. I took it, staring at the amber liquid for a moment before knocking back a sip. The burn was immediate, sharp, and unforgiving, but it was exactly what I needed. I sat there, nursing my drink, my mind still spinning. I thought about going home, about facing her, about looking her in the eyes and seeing whatever twisted version of regret she had to offer. But what was the point? Nothing she said would change what I saw. Nothing she did would make it better. And yet, there was a sick part of me that wanted to hear it, that wanted to watch her squirm, to make her explain herself, to make her understand just how badly she had screwed up. I took another sip of whiskey, my fingers tightening around the glass. And then, before I could think twice about it, I pulled out my phone. I scrolled through my contacts past old friends, past coworkers, past names that didn't mean anything to me right now. Then I saw hers, my wife. I hovered over her name, my thumb twitching. I shouldn't call. I knew I shouldn't call. But the anger inside me wasn't done yet. I tapped the screen, pressing the phone to my ear. It rang once, twice. Then she picked up. "Hello." Her voice was shaky, unsure. "Good." I said nothing. I just let the silence stretch, let her feel the weight of it, let her wonder why I had called. "Are you there?" she asked after a moment, her voice barely above a whisper. I still didn't speak. Because what was there to say? That I hated her? That I wanted to erase every memory of her from my life? That I wanted to go back in time and never lay eyes on her in the first place? Or did I want to ask why? Why him? Why our bed? Why throw everything away like it meant nothing? But none of those questions mattered anymore. I took a slow breath, my fingers tightening around my glass. Then finally I spoke. I saw everything. A sharp inhale on the other end. A quiet gasp. I hung up before she could say another word. Because I didn't need to hear her lies. Not tonight. Not ever. I stared at my phone after hanging up, my thumbs still hovering over the screen like I was expecting it to ring again. Like she'd called back, desperate to explain, to beg, to try and twist the knife in a different direction. But nothing happened. No call. No message. Nothing. It was almost worse than if she had. I set the phone down on the bar, exhaling slowly through my nose. The bartender glanced my way, but didn't say anything. Smart man. I knocked back the rest of my whiskey, feeling the burn scorch its way down my throat, but it didn't dull the anger inside me. Nothing could. She knew. She knew I had seen her. Knew I had watched her betray me in the most disgusting, shameless way possible. And now, what? She was waiting for me to calm down? Waiting for me to come home, so she could put on some fake tears and tell me it didn't mean anything? I could already picture it. She'd be sitting on the couch, hands wringing in her lap, voice trembling as she told me it was a mistake, that it was just a moment of weakness, like she hadn't invited that bastard into my house, like she hadn't taken him to our bed, like she hadn't chosen to do it. I gritted my teeth, my fingers flexing around the empty glass. "Another?" the bartender asked. I should have said no. I should have gotten up, walked out of that bar, and figured out what the hell I was going to do next. But instead, I nodded. He poured. I drank. And still, the fire inside me wouldn't burn out. I don't know how long I sat there, staring at the bottles lining the shelves, listening to the low hum of conversation around me. I wasn't drunk, not yet, but I was floating in that space just before it. That place where the edges of your rage blur, but the cause of it still sits in the back of your mind like a weight you can't shake. I had spent years building my life with that woman. Years working, sacrificing, making sure she had everything she needed. And now, I was sitting alone in a bar while she was probably back home, curled up in our bed, pretending she was the one suffering. The thought made my hands clench into fists. I needed to do something. I couldn't just sit here, letting the anger eat me alive. I grabbed my phone again, scrolling through my contacts. I wasn't sure what I was looking for. A distraction? A reason not to go back home? Someone to remind me that I still existed outside of her? Then my eyes landed on a name I hadn't thought about in a long time. Nick. I hesitated. We hadn't spoken in months. Maybe longer. Not because of anything bad, just life. I had gotten wrapped up in work, in my marriage, in making sure everything was perfect. Perfect. What a joke. I exhaled sharply and tapped his name. It rang twice before he picked up. Holy shit. Nick's voice came through the speaker, surprised but amused. Did someone die? Or did you just forget I existed? I let out a short, humorless laugh. Not yet. There was a pause. You sound like hell, man. Feel like it, too. Nick didn't ask questions, not right away. He never had been the type. Where are you? He asked. Westwood Bar off 8th. I'm 20 minutes out. He hung up without another word. That was the thing about Nick. He didn't waste time on bullshit. If I had called him and told him I needed him, he'd show up, no questions asked. And right now, I needed someone who wasn't going to look at me with pity. I shoved my phone back in my pocket and signaled the bartender for another drink. 20 minutes. I could wait. Nick arrived in 15. I heard him before I saw him. The heavy thud of boots against the wooden floor, the way the energy in the bar shifted as he walked in like he owned the place. He hadn't changed. Still broad-shouldered, still carrying that casual confidence that made people notice him. He spotted me immediately, eyes narrowing as he strode over. Jesus Christ, he muttered, dropping into the seat next to me. You look like you crawled out of a grave. Feel like it, too. He snorted, waving at the bartender. 2 beers. The bartender nodded and went to grab them. Nick turned back to me, his expression more serious now. What happened? I didn't answer right away. I wasn't sure how to say it. But then the words came, sharp and bitter. My wife is screwing the plumber. Nick blinked. Then, without hesitation, he picked up my empty whiskey glass and downed the last drops like he was the one who needed a drink. Well, shit. Yeah. The bartender returned with our beers. Nick grabbed his, took a long sip, and then set it down with a sharp exhale. You want me to kill him? The question was so flat, so casual, that I almost laughed. No. Shame. I would have done it for free. I shook my head, staring down at my drink. Not worth it. Nick leaned back in his seat, drumming his fingers against the bar. You gonna divorce her? The question hit me harder than I expected. Divorce. I hadn't even let myself think that far yet. Would I? Could I? Did I want to? I should. I knew I should. There was no coming back from this. No apology that would fix what she did. No way to erase what I had seen. But the idea of signing those papers, of untangling our lives after so many years. I took another sip of beer, swallowing hard. I don't know. Nick watched me for a long moment. Then he sighed. Look, man, you don't have to figure everything out tonight. But one thing's for sure, you don't go back there. I exhaled through my nose. I wasn't planning to. Good. He clinked his bottle against mine. Because tonight we drink. Tomorrow, we figure out how to ruin her goddamn life. I didn't smile. Not really. But for the first time since walking into that bedroom, something in me eased. Maybe I didn't know what came next. But I did know one thing. I wasn't going to let her walk away from this unscathed. Not a chance in hell. The bar was buzzing now, more people filtering in as the night stretched on. The music was louder, the conversations blending into a dull hum around me, but I barely heard any of it. My world had shrunk down to the drink in my hand, the weight of Nick's words still settling in my chest. Because tonight we drink. Tomorrow, we figure out how to ruin her goddamn life. I took another sip of beer, the bitterness coating my tongue. Ruining her life. It should have felt like the natural next step. A woman like that, who could smile on my face, kiss me goodnight, share my bed, and still find a way to betray me, deserved to have everything taken from her. And yet, a small part of me hesitated. Not because I wanted to forgive her, God, no, but because I had spent years of my life believing she was mine, that we were a team, that everything I had built was for us. Letting go of that completely? It felt like trying to claw my way out of quicksand. Nick must have seen something shift in my expression because he nudged my arm. Don't tell me you're having second thoughts, he muttered. I let out a slow breath, rolling the bottle between my palms. Not second thoughts. Just, I don't know. Nick scoffed. She made her choice, man. She didn't trip and fall onto the plumber's dick. I let out a bitter laugh, shaking my head. Yeah, no shit. She didn't just cheat on you. She disrespected you. Your house, your bed, everything. His voice darkened. You let her walk away from this without consequences, and she's going to do the same damn thing to the next guy. And the one after that. He wasn't wrong. I took another drink, my grip tightening around the bottle. Nick leaned back in his seat, studying me. You want to know what I do? I lifted a brow. Do I? He smirked, but there was nothing friendly about it. I take everything from her. Every last goddamn thing. You married? Got a joint account. I nodded slowly. His grin widened. Then empty that shit before she gets the chance. Lock her out. Freeze her cards. Make sure she wakes up tomorrow with nothing but regret and an eviction notice. My stomach twisted at the thought. Not because I felt bad for her, but because it was my money, my hard work. I had spent years making sure we had a good life. Taking it all away, cutting her off completely, meant burning that bridge for good. And maybe that's exactly what needed to happen. Nick wasn't done. You got a lawyer? Not yet. Find one. Now. Before she does. He leaned in. And if she tries to play dirty, you make sure she loses everything. The house, the car, the dog. Whatever the hell you've got together. I exhaled slowly, setting my beer down. This wasn't just about revenge. This was about making sure she didn't walk away unscathed. About making sure I wasn't the only one left picking up the pieces. I pulled out my phone, scrolling through my banking app. I had full access to our accounts. She hadn't had time to do anything yet. Hadn't even called me after I hung up on her. Maybe she was still sitting at home, crying into a pillow, hoping I'd come back and give her the chance to explain. Or maybe she was still with him. The thought sent another rush of anger through me, hot and fast. I clicked into our joint account, hovering over the transfer option. I could do it right now. Move every last cent into my personal account. Leave her with nothing. But before I could press the button, my phone buzzed. A message. From her. Please come home. We need to talk. I stared at the screen, my jaw tightening. Talk. Now, she wanted to talk. Nick glanced at my phone, scoffing. Oh, hell no. Don't you dare go back there. I wasn't planning to, but a part of me still wanted to know what she had to say. Would she lie? Would she beg? Would she try to flip it on me? Make it my fault somehow? I exhaled sharply and locked my phone, shoving it into my pocket. I'm not going back. Nick smirked. Good. But that didn't mean I wasn't going to respond. I pulled the phone back out and typed 3 words. We're done. Forever. Then I blocked her number. Nick let out a low whistle. Now, that is how you do it. I downed the rest of my beer and set the empty bottle on the bar. I didn't feel better. Not yet. But I would. Because this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. I stared at my phone for a long moment after sending that final message. Those 3 words that sealed everything. We're done. Forever. It should have felt like closure. Like I had just locked a door behind me that could never be reopened. But instead, I felt something else. Something sharp, something unfinished. Because it wasn't over. Not yet. And I wasn't going to let her walk away from this without paying for what she did. Nick watched me with a knowing smirk as I set my phone down, letting out a slow breath. So what's next? He asked, tipping back the last of his beer. I didn't answer right away. Because honestly, I wasn't sure. There were a dozen things I could do. Take all the money, change the locks, serve her divorce papers before she even saw it coming. Hell, I could go back to the house right now and toss all her shit onto the front lawn just to make a point. But none of that felt big enough. None of it felt final. I wanted her to feel this, the way I had felt it. I wanted her to wake up tomorrow and realize that she hadn't just made a mistake, She had burned her entire life to the ground. She had destroyed everything. And I was going to make sure she understood that. Nick must have sensed the gears turning in my head because he leaned in, voice low. You got two choices here, man. You either walk away and let her deal with whatever guilt she can muster, or you make sure she never forgets what she did to you. I didn't even have to think about it. I'm not walking away, I muttered. Nick grinned. Atta boy. I pulled my phone back out, scrolling to my banking app. The transfer option was still open, the numbers staring back at me. We had a shared account, but I was the one who managed everything. The one who made sure the bills got paid, the mortgage got handled, the savings stacked up. I had done all the work. She had just spent it. I didn't hesitate this time. I moved everything, every last cent, into my personal account, leaving the shared one empty. Nick let out a low whistle. Damn, cold as ice. She doesn't deserve a dime. And it was true. I wasn't about to fund her next affair. Wasn't about to let her use my money to keep living in my house like nothing happened. Speaking of the house, I opened another tab on my phone, scrolling to our home security app. Another thing I had set up and paid for because she never cared enough to handle any of it. I pulled up the camera feed, and there she was, sitting on the couch, her robe pulled tight around her, her face buried in her hands. She was alone. No sign of the plumber. Good. She had her phone next to her, the screen lighting up every few seconds. Probably waiting for me to respond, hoping I'd come back. I smirked, then tapped the settings button on the app. One click. That's all it took to lock her out. I changed the security code, disabled her access, and turned off her ability to unlock the front door from her phone. Nick watched over my shoulder, shaking his head in amusement. Ruthless. She made her choice, I said simply, slipping my phone back into my pocket. Now, she had nothing. No money. No security. No way to call me and beg for another chance. And it still wasn't enough. I tapped my fingers against the bar, mind racing. She doesn't work? I muttered. I paid for everything. She has no way of taking care of herself. So let her sink, Nick said. Let her figure out what it feels like to need you and not have you. I exhaled slowly. I could. I should. But part of me wanted to see it with my own eyes. Wanted to go back there, watch her crumble in real time. I should go home, I said finally. Nick arched a brow. You sure? I nodded. Not to fix anything. Just to finish it. He grinned. Then let's go. The drive back was quiet. I kept my hands tight on the wheel, my jaw clenched. Every mile that passed, my heartbeat got steadier. Slower. More focused. I wasn't angry anymore. I was ready. By the time I pulled into the driveway, it was nearly midnight. The house was dark, except for the dim glow of the living room lamp. She was still inside. I could see her through the window, pacing now, checking her phone, probably panicking after realizing she was locked out of the accounts. Good. I stepped out of the car, slamming the door, shut behind me. Nick leaned against the passenger side, arms crossed. You want me to come in? I shook my head. This is my mess. He nodded. I'll wait. I walked to the front door, pulling out my keys. When I pushed it open, she turned. And the moment our eyes met, I saw it. Fear. Not just guilt. Not just regret. Actual, genuine fear. She had finally realized what she had done. She had finally realized that she wasn't the one in control anymore. I shut the door behind me, taking slow, deliberate steps forward. She swallowed hard, wrapping her arms around herself like she was cold. I didn't think you'd come back. I didn't respond. Just stared at her. She shifted on her feet, licking her lips. I know you're angry. I know I messed up. But, don't. She flinched. I wasn't interested in her excuses. I wasn't interested in her at all. I pulled my phone out of my pocket, tapping a few buttons. A second later, the screen of her phone lit up with a notification. She hesitated, then reached for it, her hands shaking. When she read the message, her breath caught. Her eyes darted to me, wide with disbelief. You file for divorce? I didn't answer. I just smiled, because it wasn't just any divorce filing. I had made sure it was messy. No settlement. No spousal support. Nothing. She was getting nothing. And as she stood there, staring at the screen like her entire world had just shattered, I finally felt good. Finally felt free. I turned toward the stairs, heading to the bedroom. You have a week to move out, I said over my shoulder. After that, I changed the locks. She didn't say a word. And I didn't look back, because she wasn't my problem anymore.